My name is Robert. I'm 64 years old. And the day my son Michael gave me a cruise as a gift to relax, I should have known there was something terrible behind that smile. But when I came back home to get my blood pressure medication that I'd forgotten, I heard Michael talking on the phone with his wife, Claire. The words coming out of his mouth froze my blood. "Don't worry, honey. It's a one-way ticket. When he's out at sea, it'll be easy to make it look like an accident. Nobody will suspect an old man who simply fell overboard." At that moment, standing behind the door of my own house, I took a deep breath and thought, if that's how you want it, my dear son, have it your way. But you're going to regret it 3 times over. Because my only son, the boy I raised with so much love, had just made the worst mistake of his life. If Michael thought his father was a helpless old man, he was about to discover how wrong he was. A man my age who's fought his whole life, who raised children, lost his wife, survived betrayals and disappointments, doesn't give up easily. If he wanted to play dirty, I was going to show him how it's really done. But first, I needed to understand why my own son wanted to see me dead. Everything had started 3 days earlier. When Michael arrived at my house with that radiant smile I hadn't seen in years, he was carrying a golden envelope in his hands, the kind that fancy travel agencies use. "Dad," he said to me, hugging me with strange euphoria. "I have a wonderful surprise for you. You've worked so hard your whole life, sacrificed so much for us, that Claire and I decided to give you a special gift." When I opened the envelope and saw the cruise tickets, my eyes filled with tears. A Caribbean cruise, 7 days sailing through crystal waters, visiting paradise islands like the Bahamas and Turks and Caicos. It was the trip of my dreams that I'd always postponed because the money was needed for other things. Michael's education, household expenses, family emergencies. "Son, this must have cost a fortune," I said, looking at the first-class tickets. "Dad, your happiness is priceless," Michael replied with that soft voice that always melted my heart. "You deserve this and much more. Besides, you need to relax, get away from the stress of the city, breathe the pure sea air. In 64 years of life, I've learned to trust my instincts." And something in the way Michael looked at me, something in the way his eyes didn't meet mine, told me there was more than he was willing to tell. But he was my son, my only son, the baby I carried in my arms through entire nights when he had a fever, the boy I taught to walk, the teenager I supported in every important life decision. "When do I leave?" I asked, feigning an emotion I no longer completely felt. "Day after tomorrow. Dad, everything's already arranged. You just need to arrive at the port with your luggage." Claire took care of all the details. That night, while packing my suitcase, I couldn't shake a strange feeling. Michael had been very distant in recent months, visiting me less, barely calling, and suddenly this generous, unexpected gift. I concluded it was my old man's paranoia making me doubt my son's good intentions. After all, maybe he'd really realized how much I'd sacrificed for him, and finally wanted to give back some of that generosity. On departure day, I got up early, finished packing my things, and when I was ready to leave, I realized I'd forgotten my blood pressure medication in the bathroom cabinet. I went back home, opened the door carefully not to make noise, and that's when I heard Michael's voice talking on the phone in the living room. "Yes, Claire. He's already left for the port. No, he doesn't suspect anything. The plan is going perfectly." His voice sounded cold, calculating, completely different from the caring voice he used with me. I stood motionless behind the door, feeling like the floor was opening beneath my feet. "Dad's life insurance is for $200,000, Michael continued. "And with the inheritance from the house, that's at least another $300,000. Enough to pay all my debts and start over." My heart stopped. My own son was talking about my death like it was a business, a cold, calculated transaction. "Don't worry, honey. A man his age at sea. These things happen. Nobody's going to ask uncomfortable questions and will be the perfect mourers. The children devastated by the loss." Tears ran down my face, but not from sadness. It was a mixture of anger, disappointment, and a determination I hadn't felt in years. At that moment, I understood I'd raised a monster, and if I wanted to survive, I'd have to be smarter than him. I left the house in silence, pretending I hadn't heard anything. But my mind was already working at full speed. I had to get to the port. I had to board that ship. But now I knew that every step I took brought me closer to danger. During the entire taxi ride, as I watched my city streets pass by the window, I couldn't stop thinking about how it had come to this point. I, Robert Sullivan, had dedicated my entire life to being the perfect father. I married young at 20 to Michael's mother. I worked as an accountant in a small firm for 15 years, saving every penny I earned to give my family the best life possible. When my wife died of cancer, Michael was only 12 years old, and I decided that my life's only priority would be ensuring he had everything he needed. I left my job to take care of him full-time. I sold my car, pawned my watch collection, used all my savings to pay for the most expensive college in the city, Columbia University. While other fathers my age went out with friends, traveled, had fun, I stayed home doing freelance accounting work to have extra money for Michael's expenses. I never complained, never charged him for anything. I thought I was raising a good man, someone who would value everything his father had done for him. How foolish I was. When Michael married Claire 5 years ago, I was so happy. I thought I'd finally have the family I'd always dreamed of, that I'd have a daughter-in-law, grandchildren, family gatherings full of love. But Claire never liked me. From the first day, I saw in her eyes the contempt that some women feel for their fathers-in-law, as if I were a nuisance in their perfect marriage. And Michael, my dear Michael, began to change. Visits became less frequent, calls shorter, excuses more elaborate. When I asked about his work, he gave me vague answers. When I asked about his plans, he changed the subject. Now sitting in the back of that taxi, I understood there had been signs everywhere, and I'd chosen to ignore them. Like that time 6 months ago when I arrived at his house unannounced, and found Michael arguing heatedly on the phone about money. He got nervous when he saw me, hung up quickly, and told me it was a small problem at work. Or like the time I heard Claire telling a friend that if her father-in-law didn't live so close, they'd have more space. When I mentioned this to Michael, he said I'd misunderstood, that Claire really liked me. But sometimes women said things they didn't really mean. I always found excuses to defend them, to justify their behavior, to convince myself my imagination was playing tricks on me. But now, with the truth hitting me like a slap, I understood that my son had been planning this for a long time. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a calculated, thought-out, elaborate plan with the coldness of a professional killer. The taxi stopped in front of the port. The cruise ship was imposing, a white giant of 12 stories that rose toward the sky like a floating building. There were hundreds of people boarding with their suitcases, entire families excited for vacation, couples taking photos, children running back and forth. All of them would enjoy 7 wonderful days at sea. I, according to my son's plan, wouldn't come back alive. But as I dragged my suitcase toward the ship's entrance, a smile began to form on my lips. Michael had made a terrible mistake by underestimating me. He'd made the mistake of believing his father was a foolish, defenseless old man. What he didn't know was that during all those years of silence, sacrifice, apparent submission, I'd been observing, learning, storing information. I wasn't the naive man, he thought. When I handed over my documentation to board, the attendant smiled at me with that professional cordiality they use with all passengers. "Mr. Sullivan, how exciting. Your first time on a cruise, isn't it?" "Yes," I replied, keeping my voice sweet and fragile that everyone expected from a man my age. "My son gave me this trip as a gift. He said, I need to relax." "What a thoughtful son," the attendant commented while checking my documents. "He's certainly going to miss you a lot during these 7 days." If she only knew, I thought to myself, if she only knew that his plan was for these to be the last 7 days of my life. But as I climbed the ramp toward the ship's interior, I was already formulating my own strategy. I had 7 days to transform from victim to hunter. 7 days to gather the evidence I needed, 7 days to prepare the surprise I had in store for Michael. My cabin was on the 8th floor with a sea view. It was beautiful, elegant, with a comfortable bed and a small private balcony. Michael had paid for the best, probably thinking it was easier to make someone disappear from a balcony than from inside the ship. I left my suitcase on the bed and sat for a moment to think. I needed a plan, allies, and above all, evidence. Because knowing the truth was one thing. Being able to prove it was something very different. I picked up my cell phone and dialed a number I'd saved months ago but never used. It was the number of Frank Harrison, a private detective I'd met when a neighbor had problems with her ex-husband. He'd given me his business card saying that if I ever needed help, I shouldn't hesitate to call him. Detective Harrison. A deep voice answered after 3 rings. Hello, this is Robert Sullivan. We met a few months ago at the Hope Community Center, the neighbor who had a problem. I don't know if you remember me. Of course, I remember, Mr. Sullivan. How can I help you? I took a deep breath before continuing. I need to hire you for a very delicate case. My son is trying to kill me. There was silence on the other end of the line. He probably thought I was a paranoid old man with trivial family problems. Mr. Sullivan, are you sure about what you're saying? These are very serious accusations. I'm absolutely certain. I heard my son planning my death. I'm on a cruise right now and he believes this will be just a one-way trip for me. I need you to investigate his finances, his debts, everything you can find. And I need you to help me gather evidence of what he's planning. Where are you? On the Star of the Sea ship, which departs in half an hour toward the Caribbean islands. I'll be out of contact for 7 days, but when I return, I need to have as much information as possible about my son, Michael Sullivan. Understood. I'll send you my bank account by text message for you to transfer $500 as an advance. And Mr. Sullivan, tell me one thing. Be very careful. If what you're telling me is true, you're in real danger. Don't do anything that could put your safety at risk. Detective, I've lived in this world for 64 years. I've survived poverty, widowhood, raising a son alone, sacrificing my entire life for other people. Believe me, I'm not going to let my own son defeat me. Now, after hanging up with Detective Harrison, I sat in my cabin, feeling a strange mixture of fear and determination. The ship had begun to move smoothly, moving away from the port, and I knew that every mile that separated us from the coast brought me closer to the moment when Michael expected his plan to be executed. But there was something Michael didn't know about his father. I wasn't the fragile man he thought. During all these years of apparent submission, I'd been observing, learning, keeping secrets that neither he nor Claire imagined. I decided the first thing I had to do was explore the ship, know every corner, every exit, every place where someone could try to hurt me. If they were going to try to simulate an accident, I needed to be prepared for any situation. I left my cabin and began walking through the cruise ship's corridors. It was impressive. Elegant restaurants, casinos, shops, a gigantic pool on the upper deck, theaters, libraries. It was like a floating city full of life and joy. But I wasn't there to have fun. I was there to survive. As I walked, I observed the security cameras. There were many in practically every corridor in every public area. That calmed me down a bit. It would be difficult to make someone disappear in such a monitored place without raising suspicions. However, I also noticed that the private cabin balconies had no cameras, and my cabin had one of those balconies. Michael had been very clever in choosing that specific room. In the main restaurant, while having lunch alone at a table near the window, I began observing the other passengers. Most were families on vacation, older couples celebrating anniversaries, groups of friends having fun. Everyone seemed innocent, normal, happy. That's when I saw him. A man approximately my age, sitting alone at a nearby table, reading a book while eating. He had silver hair, perfectly styled, and wore an elegant blue suit. Something in his posture told me he was a strong, independent man. Our eyes met by chance, and he smiled at me with that cordiality that only people of our generation know how to share. I decided to approach. "Excuse me," I said timidly. "Would you mind if I sat with you? I hate eating alone." "Please sit down," he responded with a warm voice and a slight accent I couldn't identify. I'm Carl Anderson from Denver. And you? Robert Sullivan from Chicago. It's a pleasure to meet you, Carl. As we talked during lunch, I discovered that Carl had a story similar to mine in many ways. He was a widower, had raised children alone, had worked his entire life, and now for the first time in decades, was doing something just for himself. My children insisted so much that I take this vacation, he told me while drinking his coffee. They said it was time for me to relax, to enjoy life. At first, I resisted, but finally gave in. Same as me, I replied, feeling an immediate connection with this man. My son Michael gave me this cruise as a gift. He says, I need to get away from the stress of the city. Something in the way Carl looked at me made me feel I could trust him. There was an intelligence in his eyes, a wisdom that only comes with the experience of having lived a lot and having learned to read people. Robert, he said to me, lowering his voice, can I ask you a personal question? You seem worried, tense. That's not the typical attitude of someone on a dream trip. For a moment, I considered telling him everything, but then I remembered Detective Harrison's words about putting my safety at risk. I decided to be cautious. It's just that, well, this is my first time on a cruise. Everything is so new, so different. I guess I'm a little nervous. Carl nodded understandingly, but I could see in his eyes that he didn't completely believe me. This man had experience reading between the lines. Look, Robert, he said to me, leaning slightly in my direction. We don't know each other, but I've lived for 62 years, and I've learned to recognize when a man is in trouble. If you need to talk to someone or if you need help with anything, please don't hesitate to find me. My cabin is 1247 on the 12th floor. I felt a warmth in my chest that I hadn't felt in months. Here was a complete stranger offering me more genuine support than I'd received from my own son in years. Thank you, Carl. Really? And your cabin is very close to mine. Mine is 847 on the 8th floor. Perfect. Then we'll be ship neighbors. After lunch, I decided to explore more of the cruise. I went to the library where I found computers with internet access. It was limited and expensive, but I could send short messages. I sat in front of one of the computers and wrote a quick email to Detective Harrison. I'm fine. Especially investigate Michael's gambling debts. I think that's the key to everything. I have a new ally on the ship. I'll keep in touch when I can. Robert. Next, I went to the ship's casino, not to gamble, but to observe. I wanted to understand how the world of betting worked, what kind of debt someone could accumulate, how people got so desperate for money that they'd consider murder as an option. I saw men and women betting large amounts with the naturalness of someone buying a magazine. I saw the excitement on their faces when they won and the despair when they lost. I saw how some gamblers seemed to be in a downward spiral, betting more and more money in a desperate attempt to recover what they'd lost. And then I understood Michael wasn't just an ungrateful son. He was a desperate man, probably with huge debts, who saw his father's death as the only solution to his financial problems. That night, while dining in the main restaurant, I ran into Carl again. This time, he approached my table without me inviting him. Robert, he said to me, sitting in front of me. I've been thinking about our conversation this afternoon, and I need to tell you something. You don't look like a man on vacation. You look like a man who's running from something or planning something. I remained silent for a moment, evaluating how much I could reveal to him. Carl, I finally said, have you ever discovered that someone you love deeply betrayed you in the worst possible way? His eyes softened, and I saw in them a glimmer of recognition. Yes, he answered simply. My business partner. I discovered he'd been embezzling money from our company for years, almost led us to bankruptcy. What did you do? What I had to do. I gathered all the evidence, confronted him, and made sure he paid for what he'd done. But Robert, we're talking about your son. I took a deep breath. Carl had already shown he could keep difficult family secrets, and I needed an ally, someone to trust during these crucial 7 days. Carl, I said, looking directly into his eyes. My son is trying to kill me, and I have 7 days to stop him and prove what he's planning. The expression on Carl's face changed immediately. It wasn't surprise. It wasn't disbelief. It was the look of a man who'd lived long enough to know that families can hide the darkest secrets. "Robert," he said to me, lowering his voice to the point of becoming a whisper. "Tell me everything from the beginning." For the next 40 minutes, I told Carl the whole story. I talked about the cruise gift, about the phone conversation I'd heard, about the gambling debts I suspected Michael had, about the life insurance and inheritance he expected to receive after my death. Carl listened to me without interrupting even once. When I finished, he remained silent for a few minutes, processing all the information. "Robert," he finally said, "this is very serious. You're in real danger, but it also seems to me that you already have a plan." "I'm starting to," I replied. "I've hired a private detective to investigate Michael's finances, but I need more than that. I need concrete evidence of his intentions. I need witnesses. I need evidence that a judge can't ignore. And how do you think you'll get all that while you're on this ship? That's where I need your help, Carl. Michael is going to try to communicate with me during the trip. He's going to call me, send me messages, pretending to be the concerned son. Each of those conversations will be an opportunity for him to betray himself." Carl nodded slowly, beginning to understand where my plan was going. "You want to record," he said. "Exactly. But I can't do it alone. I need witnesses. I need someone who can confirm what I'm documenting. Someone without emotional connection to Michael, someone credible." "Count on me," Carl replied without hesitation. "But Robert, there's something else we should consider. If Michael is really planning to simulate an accident on this ship, it's possible there's someone else involved, someone on the cruise who's working with him." That possibility hadn't occurred to me, and it chilled my blood. "You think Michael could have bribed someone from the ship's crew?" "It's possible. Or he could have hired someone to pose as a passenger." "Robert, you need to be very alert in the coming days. Don't trust anyone except me. Don't accept drinks from strangers. Don't be alone in isolated places, especially on your balcony." I'd already thought about the balcony. "It's a very convenient place, very private." "Exactly. Look, I have a proposal. Why don't you spend the nights in my cabin? I have a suite with a sofa bed. That way, we'll be together, and if someone comes looking for you in your room, they won't find you." Carl's generosity moved me deeply. This man, who'd met me just hours ago, was willing to risk his own safety to help me. "Carl, I can't ask you to do that. If Michael really has someone on this ship, Robert." Carl interrupted me firmly. "I'm 62 years old. I raised 4 children and buried a wife. I ran my own company for 30 years. I'm not afraid of a spoiled brat who wants to kill his father for money. Besides," he added with a mischievous smile, "it's been a long time since I've had an exciting adventure." That night, after dinner, Carl helped me take some of my essential things to his cabin. It was much larger than mine, with the living room separate from the bedroom and a wider balcony. But most importantly, it had 2 beds which allowed us to watch over each other. While we organized my things, Carl asked me detailed questions about Michael, about his personality, his habits, his relationship with Claire. "Tell me, Robert, was Michael always manipulative, or is this something new?" "He was always very clever," I replied, thinking carefully. "Since he was little, he knew exactly what to say to get what he wanted. But I thought it was normal childhood cunning. I never imagined it could turn into this." "And Claire, what's the relationship between them like?" "At first they seemed very much in love, but in recent years I've noticed tension. Claire is always complaining about money, that they need a bigger house, more expensive vacations, a better car. And Michael always promises that things will get better, that he'll get more money. Now we know where that money would come from," Carl commented darkly. Around 10 at night, my phone rang. It was Michael. Carl and I looked at each other. The moment had come to put our plan into practice. "Remember," Carl whispered while preparing his own phone to record. "Make him talk. Make him betray himself. I took a deep breath and answered. Hello, son. Hi, Dad. How's the cruise? Are you having fun? His voice sounded perfectly normal, caring, concerned. If I hadn't heard his conversation with Claire, I would have believed he really cared about me. It's beautiful, son. The ship is amazing. My cabin is very comfortable. Thank you so much for this generous gift. You're welcome, Dad. You deserve it. Have you met new people? Are you making friends? An interesting question. Why did it matter to him if I was making friends? Yes, I met a very kind gentleman, Carl. We're eating together. There was an almost imperceptible pause before Michael responded. That's good, Dad. It's important that you're not alone. But also, be careful. On these cruises, sometimes there are people who take advantage of older passengers. Carl looked at me with wide eyes. Michael had just sown doubt about anyone who could be my ally. Don't worry, son. I'm very cautious. But tell me, how are things there? How's Claire? Everything's fine, Dad. Claire sends you a hug. She said she hopes you're having a lot of fun and that you relax completely. How kind of her. Michael, can I ask you something? Of course, Dad. Whatever you want. Why did you decide to give me this trip as a gift now? I mean, it was so sudden, so unexpected. Another pause, this time longer. Well, Claire and I have been talking a lot about you lately. We realized you seem very tired, very stressed, and we thought you needed a break to get away from everything for a while. Get away from everything? I repeated, looking at Carl, who was writing down every word. Yes, Dad. Sometimes we need to completely disconnect from routine, don't we? I suppose so. Michael, can I confess something to you? Of course, Dad. At first, I felt a little guilty about accepting such an expensive gift. It must have cost a lot of money. Dad, please don't worry about that. Money isn't a problem. Besides, it's an investment in your well-being, and that's priceless. Carl wrote on a piece of paper and showed it to me. Ask about the return. Michael, a silly question. Do you have a copy of my return ticket? Because I checked my documents and only found the one-way ticket. The silence that followed was deafening. It lasted so long that for a moment I thought the call had dropped. Michael, are you there? Yes. Yes, Dad. Sorry. Claire was telling me something about the tickets. Don't worry. The travel agency has everything organized. You just need to enjoy the trip and we'll take care of the details. But Michael, I want to be sure I can come back. Could you check with the agency tomorrow and confirm for me? Dad, please trust me. Everything is perfectly organized. You don't have anything to worry about. Just relax and enjoy. That's the goal of the trip. Okay, son. I trust you completely. Perfect, Dad. I love you very much, sweet dreams. I love you too, Michael. Good night. When I hung up, Carl and I remained silent for a few minutes, processing what we just heard. Robert, Carl said finally. That conversation was very revealing. The way he avoided the question about the return ticket, the way he reassured you saying not to worry about anything. It's like he's trying to keep you in a state of false security. And the question about whether I was making friends, I added, it's like he was evaluating if I had allies, if there was someone who would notice if something happened to me. Exactly. Robert, tomorrow, we need to go to the ship's office and personally verify the status of your return ticket. I want to see with my own eyes what Michael really booked. The next morning, Carl and I woke up early with a clear mission. After having breakfast in his cabin to avoid unnecessarily exposing me to public restaurants, we went directly to the passenger service office on the third floor of the ship. The office was an elegant space with several desks staffed by uniformed employees. We approached a young woman named Patricia, according to her badge, who received us with a professional smile. "Good morning, gentlemen. How can I help you?" "Good morning," I replied, trying to keep my voice calm. "I need to verify my complete travel itinerary. My name is Robert Sullivan, cabin 847. Patricia typed quickly on her computer and frowned slightly. "Mr. Sullivan, I see here that you have the 7-day cruise booked along the Caribbean, but she stopped, looking at the screen with confusion. "But what?" Carl asked, noticing the hesitation in the employee's voice. "It's a bit strange. I see you have a one-way ticket, but no reservation appears for the return flight to Chicago. Normally, our packages include complete round-trip transportation." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Even knowing the truth. Hearing the official confirmation hurt deeply. "What does that mean exactly?" Carl asked, pretending to be as confused as I was. "Well, it means that when the cruise ends in 7 days, you have no way to get home. It could be a system error. Or maybe whoever bought the package thought about adding the return flight later." "Who bought this package?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Patricia reviewed the information again. "Here it says it was purchased by Michael Sullivan with a credit card in his name." "Is he your relative?" "He's my son," I replied, feeling a mixture of sadness and anger. "Oh well, then surely he'll take care of buying your return ticket. But Mr. Sullivan, I recommend you communicate with him soon, because flights from Miami to Chicago tend to fill up quickly, especially at this time of year." Carl and I looked at each other significantly. Carl intervened. "Would it be possible for Mr. Sullivan to buy his return ticket right now to be sure he'll have a seat?" "Of course. Let me check availability." Patricia typed for several minutes. "I have availability on a flight leaving Saturday at 3:00 p.m. the day the cruise ends. The cost would be $750. "I want it," I said immediately, pulling out my credit card. While Patricia processed the purchase, Carl whispered in my ear. "Robert, we just got our first piece of evidence. Michael deliberately didn't buy your return ticket. That shows premeditated intent." When we left the office, we decided to walk on the ship's deck to talk privately. The day was beautiful with bright sun and a gentle breeze, but I couldn't enjoy anything knowing what I knew. "Carl," I said as we walked near the railing, "every piece of evidence we find hurts me more. It's like discovering over and over that my own son wants to see me dead." "I know, Robert, but every piece of evidence we find also protects you more. Look what we just did. Now you have your return ticket, and we have documented evidence that Michael never intended for you to come back alive." At that moment, my phone rang. It was a text message from Michael. "Good morning, Dad. How did you wake up? Did you sleep well in your cabin?" I showed the message to Carl. "He's checking if you're in your cabin," he told me. "He probably expected you to answer from there." I decided to test something. I replied, "Good morning, son. I slept very well. I'm on the deck sunbathing. The ship is wonderful." The response came almost immediately. "That's good, Dad. Enjoy a lot. Have you explored the whole ship yet?" Another strange question. Why did he care how much I'd explored the ship? "I haven't explored everything yet. It's very big. Yesterday, I got to know the restaurants and the casino. Today, I want to see the pool and maybe the spa." "Perfect, Dad. Just be careful near the railings. Sometimes people get seasick with the ship's movement and can lose their balance." Carl read the message over my shoulder and his face went pale. "Robert," he whispered. "He just suggested how you're going to die. An accident near the railings." "I know," I replied, feeling a chill despite the sun's heat. "He's planting the idea, preparing the ground for when the news reaches shore." I replied to Michael, don't worry, son. I'm very careful. I always stay away from the edges. That's what I hope, Dad. I love you very much and want you to come back safe and sound. What irony, Michael talking about wanting me to come back safe and sound when he himself had planned for me to never return. During the rest of the day, Carl and I elaborated our plan in more detail. We decided we needed more evidence, more recordings, more proof of Michael's true intentions. We also determined it was crucial to identify if there was someone else on the ship working with him. Carl suggested we pay attention to any crew member who showed special interest in me or any passenger who seemed to be watching me. That afternoon, while we were at the pool, I noticed a man approximately 40 years old was watching us from the bar. He was wearing a green shirt and long pants, which was strange for being next to a pool. Every time I looked at him, he quickly looked away. "Carl," I whispered. "That man at the bar, the one in the green shirt. Notice he's watching us." Carl turned discreetly to look at him. "Yes, I see. And you're right. His behavior is suspicious. Let's do a test." Carl got up and walked to the other side of the pool as if going to the bathroom. I stayed in my place watching the man. Indeed, his eyes followed me the whole time, completely ignoring Carl. When he came back, he confirmed what I already knew. "Robert, that man is definitely watching you specifically. When I left, he didn't pay me any attention. His eyes were fixed on you. What do we do? Let's be very clever. Get up and walk toward the elevator. I'll stay here and watch if he follows you." I did exactly what Carl suggested. I got up, slowly, gathered my things, and walked toward the elevator. When the doors opened, I looked back discreetly. The man in the green shirt had gotten up from his place at the bar and was walking in my direction. I quickly entered the elevator and pressed the button for the 12th floor where Carl's cabin was. When the doors closed, I felt temporary relief, but also terrifying confirmation. Michael definitely had someone watching me on the ship. 15 minutes later, Carl arrived at the cabin. "Robert, you're right. That man followed you to the elevator. When he saw you'd gone up, he also took the next elevator. He's definitely suspicious. What do we do now? If Michael has someone here, I'm in real danger." "We're going to be smarter than them," Carl replied with determination. "Tomorrow, we're going to confront that man. But in a safe way. We're going to make him betray himself, just like we're doing with Michael." That night, while we had dinner in Carl's cabin to avoid exposing ourselves in public restaurants, my phone rang again. This time, it was Claire. "Hi, Robert. How are you?" "It's Claire. How's the cruise?" It was the first time in months that Claire had called me directly. Her voice sounded forkily cheerful. "Hello, Claire. What a surprise to hear from you. The cruise is beautiful. Thank you very much. That's good. Robert, Michael told me you talked yesterday and that you're very happy. That gives us a lot of peace of mind." Carl activated the recording on his phone. "Yes, I'm having a lot of fun. Although, I have a question, Claire. Yesterday, I went to the cruise office and they told me I don't have a return ticket. Do you know anything about that?" There was a long pause before Claire responded. "Oh, Robert, how strange. Michael took care of all the details. Maybe there was an error in the system. But don't worry, we'll take care of solving it." "Are you sure?" "Because I already bought my own ticket to be calm." Another pause. "You already bought your return ticket, Robert. You didn't need to do that. We were going to take care of it. It's just that I got a little scared of being stuck in Miami without a way to get home." "Of course. Of course. I understand perfectly. Well, Robert, I'll let you continue having fun. We'll see you when you get back." "Claire, before you hang up, can I ask you something?" "Yes. Tell me, why did you decide to give me this trip as a gift? Now, Michael told me you had talked about me, but he didn't explain what specifically motivated this. Well, it's that lately we've noticed you very tired, Robert. Very stressed. And we thought you needed an extended rest. An extended rest? Yes, you know, to get away from everything for a while. Sometimes we need to completely disconnect from daily routine. The same words Michael had used as if they'd rehearsed the answer. I understand. Well, thank you very much for worrying about me. You're welcome, Robert. Take care of yourself and enjoy every moment. When I hung up, Carl and I looked at each other in silence. Robert, Carl finally said to me, that conversation was even more revealing than yesterday's with Michael. Claire is clearly involved in the plan. The way she got nervous when you said you'd already bought the return ticket. It's like you'd ruined something they'd planned. On the third day of the cruise, Carl and I decided it was time to confront the man in the green shirt who had watched me, but we would do it cleverly in a public place where we'd be safe. After breakfast, we went down to the ship's casino. It was a perfect place full of people with lots of security cameras and ship crew nearby all the time. Carl had devised a brilliant plan. Robert, he explained to me as we walked toward the casino. I'm going to sit at a poker table near the entrance. You're going to sit alone at one of the slot machines. When that man appears, because I'm sure he will, you're going to act like you're a little drunk, like you had too much to drink at breakfast. Why? So he feels confident. So he thinks you're vulnerable. Predators always attack when they think the prey is weak. If he's really working with Michael, he'll take advantage of this opportunity to approach you. The plan worked perfectly. I had barely spent 20 minutes playing the slot machines, pretending to stagger slightly, and talking to myself as if I was seasick when I saw the man in the green shirt approaching. This time he was wearing a yellow shirt, but it was definitely the same person. Tall black hair, approximately 40 years old, with a smile that tried to be friendly but gave me chills. "Excuse me, sir," he said to me, approaching my machine. "Are you okay? You seem a little tired." "Oh, yes," I replied, slightly slurring my words. "I think I had too many mimosas at breakfast. These vacations are driving me crazy." He smiled and I could see in his eyes that he'd fallen into the trap. "Is this your first time on a cruise?" he asked me, sitting at the machine next to mine. "Yes, my son gave me this trip as a gift," he says. "I need to relax." I gave him exactly the information I knew he wanted to hear. What a thoughtful son. And where is he now? Is he on the cruise, too? No, he stayed in Chicago. This is just for me. A special gift so I can relax completely. The man nodded, and I saw how his eyes gleamed with that information. Well, then you have to make the most of it. Have you explored the whole ship yet? Almost everything. Yesterday, I was on the upper deck watching the sunset. It's beautiful, but it's a little scary being so close to the water. Scary? Why? Oh, it's that I'm very clumsy, I said, laughing as if I were really drunk. I'm always afraid of getting too close to the railings. With this rocking of the ship, you can fall so easily. The expression on his face changed subtly. It was as if he'd received very valuable information. You're right to be careful, he told me with a voice that now sounded more calculating, especially at night. The decks get slippery with the sea moisture. Really? Oh, how terrible. Well, then I'd better stay in my cabin after dinner. What floor is your cabin on? There was the question we'd been waiting for. On the 8th floor, 847. It has a beautiful balcony, but as I said, I'm afraid to lean over too much. The man smiled in a way that chilled my blood. Well, sir, it was a pleasure meeting you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your cruise. Very much. He got up and walked away quickly. From my position, I could see he headed directly to the ship's public phones. Carl had observed the entire conversation from his poker table. When the man walked away, he also got up and followed him discreetly. 15 minutes later, Carl came back to find me with an expression of urgency on his face. "Robert, we need to talk immediately in private." We quickly went up to his cabin and Carl closed the door with the lock. "Robert, that man made a call immediately after talking to you." I couldn't hear the whole conversation, but I clearly heard these words. "Yes, he's in 847, 8th floor with balcony. He said he's afraid of getting close to the railings." Perfect for what we need. I felt like the air had left my lungs. "Carl, are you absolutely sure of what you heard?" "Absolutely, Robert. That man is definitely working with Michael, and now he knows exactly where to find you and what's the best way to make your death look like an accident." I sat on the cabin sofa, feeling the weight of reality falling on me like an avalanche. What do we do now if Michael has someone here and that someone already knows how he plans to kill me? "We're going to get ahead of them," Carl replied with a determination that calmed me. "Robert, you're not going to set foot in your cabin again for the rest of the trip. You're going to stay here with me where you're safe. But more importantly, we're going to set a trap." "What kind of trap?" "Tomorrow night will be the captain's gala party. Everyone will be in the main hall until late at night. That will be the perfect night for someone to try to enter your cabin or wait for you on your balcony." "Carl, I'm not going to use my life as bait." "You won't need to. But we're going to use this opportunity to catch that man red-handed. We're going to notify ship security. We're going to set a trap. And we're going to get irrefutable evidence of what's happening." That afternoon, while we planned our strategy, my phone rang again. It was Michael, but this time his voice sounded different, more anxious. "Dad, how are you? Are you enjoying the cruise?" "Very well, son. Every day is a new adventure. Are you still sleeping well in your cabin? Haven't had problems with noise or anything?" A very specific question, as if he were verifying if I was still using my cabin. "No, son. I sleep perfectly. My cabin is very quiet." "That's good, Dad. Tomorrow is Thursday, isn't it? Do you have special plans?" "I think tomorrow is the captain's gala party. It's going to be very elegant." "Oh, yes. Those parties are beautiful. Are you going?" "Of course. I already have my green suit ready." "Perfect, Dad. Enjoy a lot. What time do those parties usually end?" Another very specific question. Michael was collecting information about my schedule. "I'm not sure. Probably late, after midnight." "Well, when it's over, go straight to your cabin to rest. Don't walk around the decks at night. It can be dangerous." Carl looked at me with wide eyes. Michael had just given me specific instructions to go directly to my cabin after the party. The exact place where someone would be waiting for me. "Don't worry, son. I'll go straight to my room after the party." "Perfect, Dad. I love you very much. Sleep well." When I hung up, Carl and I remained silent for several minutes. "Robert," he finally said to me, "that conversation confirms everything. Michael knows exactly when the attack will be. He probably told that man himself that tomorrow night after the gala party, you'll be alone in your cabin." "Carl, I'm scared. This plan is becoming very real, very dangerous." "I know, Robert, but we're also very close to having all the evidence we need. One more night and we'll have enough evidence to send Michael to jail for the rest of his life." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every noise in the hallway startled me. Every movement of the ship reminded me how vulnerable I was in the middle of the ocean. But I also felt something I hadn't felt in years, an inner strength, a fierce determination not to let myself be defeated. Michael had completely underestimated his father. He'd made the mistake of believing I was a defenseless old man who would give up easily. Tomorrow night, he was going to discover how wrong he was. On Thursday morning, Carl and I put the most crucial part of our plan into practice. We had to contact ship security without alerting the man who was watching me, and we needed to do it in a way that they would take us seriously. Carl suggested we go directly to Captain John Peterson. As a former businessman, he knew that going directly to the highest authority was the best way to ensure we'd be heard. Robert, he explained to me as we prepared. Cruise ship captains are trained to handle all kinds of situations, kidnappings, robberies, murder attempts. He'll know exactly what to do. At 9 a.m., we presented ourselves at the captain's office. He was a man of approximately 50 years old with gray hair and a presence that immediately inspired respect and confidence. "Gentlemen, I'm Captain John Peterson. How can I help you?" Carl took the initiative. "Captain, we have a very serious situation to report. Mr. Robert Sullivan is being watched by a suspicious man, and we have reason to believe his life is in danger." The captain invited us to sit down and listened attentively while we told the whole story. We showed him the recordings of the phone conversations with Michael and Claire. We explained about the one-way tickets and described in detail the man who had followed me. "Mr. Sullivan," the captain said when we finished, "this is extremely serious. If what you're telling me is true, we're talking about a premeditated murder attempt on my ship." "Captain," I replied, "I understand it seems incredible, but every piece of evidence we've gathered points to the same conclusion." "It doesn't seem incredible to me at all," the captain replied gravely. "I've been sailing for 20 years, and I've seen everything. Greed can lead people to do unimaginable things, even to their own family members." Carl leaned forward. "Captain, we have a plan to catch this man red-handed tonight during the gala party, but we need your help and your security team's cooperation." The captain listened to our plan in detail. It was risky, but clever. I would go to the gala party as planned, but instead of going to my cabin afterward, I would hide with Carl. Meanwhile, ship security would watch my cabin and the surrounding area to catch the suspicious man if he tried anything. "It's a good plan," the captain admitted. "But we're going to make some modifications to ensure your safety completely." He explained that they would install additional cameras near my cabin, that they would have security agents disguised as passengers in nearby corridors, and that they would give me a panic device I could activate from anywhere on the ship. "Mr. Sullivan," the captain said before we left, "I want you to know that from this moment on, you're under this ship's official protection. I won't allow anything to happen to you while you're under my responsibility." For the first time in days, I felt truly safe. The rest of the day passed slowly. Carl and I stayed in his cabin, going over the plan several times, making sure we were prepared for any eventuality. At 5 p.m., we began getting ready for the gala party. It was important that I looked normal, that I didn't give any sign that I knew what was happening. I put on my most elegant green suit, styled my hair carefully, and prepared myself as if I were really excited for the party. Carl wore a beautiful golden suit that made him look sophisticated and confident. "Robert," he said to me as we finished getting ready, "tonight everything will change. Tomorrow morning you'll be free of Michael forever, and he'll be facing the consequences of his actions." The gala party was spectacular. The ship's main hall had been transformed into a floating palace with elegant decorations, live music, and tables full of exquisite food. There were hundreds of elegantly dressed passengers dancing, laughing, enjoying the night. But I couldn't concentrate on the beauty of the party. My eyes constantly searched for the man in colored shirts, trying to locate him among the crowd. I found him near the bar, this time wearing a white shirt and a black suit. He seemed dressed for the occasion, but his eyes were fixed on me, following my every movement. Carl and I danced, ate, talked with other passengers, pretending it was a normal vacation night, but internally we were both counting the minutes until we could put our plan into action. At 11:30 p.m., I decided it was time to make my move. I approached Carl and whispered, "It's time. I'm going to leave the main hall as if I were going to my cabin. You wait 5 minutes and follow me." I left the main hall, walking slowly as if I were tired after a long night of partying. I took the elevator to the 8th floor where my cabin was. But instead of going to my room, I quickly headed toward the emergency stairs that led to the 12th floor. From the stairs, I could see the corridor leading to my cabin. It was deserted, lit only by the ship's night lights. Carl arrived 5 minutes later and together we hid in the stairs, watching my corridor through a small window. "See anything?" he whispered. "Not yet, but I'm sure he'll appear." We didn't have to wait long. At 12:15, we saw a figure moving stealthily through the corridor. It was the man in the white shirt, but now he was wearing black gloves and holding something in his hands that I couldn't identify. He headed directly to my cabin and stopped in front of the door. He took something from his pocket, probably lock-picking tools, and began working on the door. "Carl," I whispered. "He's entering my cabin. We need to alert security now." Carl immediately activated the panic device the captain had given us. A small red light began blinking, sending a silent signal to the security team. They managed to open my cabin door and entered. From our position, we could see he had a small flashlight and was inspecting the room. 3 minutes later, ship security agents began appearing in the corridor. They moved silently, surrounding my cabin from both sides. Suddenly, the man came out of my cabin and headed for the balcony. We continued watching him through the corridor windows. He was inspecting the balcony railing as if planning exactly how to make my death look like an accident. That's when ship security acted. 3 agents entered the cabin simultaneously, surrounding the man before he could react. From our position in the stairs, we could hear the commotion when they arrested him. He was shouting, insisting he'd entered the cabin by mistake, that he'd gotten the wrong room. But when they searched his pockets, they found a small bottle with liquid lock-picking tools and, most incriminating of all, a cell phone with text messages from Michael. Carl and I went down to the 8th floor where Captain John was already supervising the situation. "Mr. Sullivan," the captain said, "we caught your attacker and found very interesting evidence." He showed me the man's cell phone. There were several messages from Michael with specific instructions. "Wait until after midnight. Make it look like he fell from the balcony by accident. Make sure there are no signs of struggle." I felt a mixture of relief and horror. Relief because I was alive and safe. Horror because I had final confirmation that my own son had paid someone to murder me. "Captain," I asked with a trembling voice. "What happens now?" "Now, Mr. Sullivan, this man will be formally arrested when we reach port tomorrow, and you'll have all the evidence you need to prosecute your son for attempted murder." Friday morning was the longest of my life. After the man Michael had hired was arrested, Carl and I stayed awake in his cabin, processing everything that had happened. Captain John had ordered the detainee to remain in a ship security cell until we reached port. "Robert," Carl said to me as we had coffee at 3 a.m., "do you realize what we just did? We not only saved your life, but now we have irrefutable evidence to send Michael to jail." "I know," I replied, feeling a strange mixture of triumph and deep sadness. "But Carl, I also just discovered that my only son, the boy I raised with so much love, really wanted to see me dead. I don't know how I'll recover from this." "You'll recover because you're a stronger man than Michael ever imagined and because now you'll have the opportunity to live your life free from his manipulation and cruelty." At 6 a.m., Detective Harrison called me from Chicago. He'd worked all night investigating Michael's finances. "Mr. Sullivan," he told me with an excited voice, "I found exactly what we were looking for. Your son has gambling debts of over $200,000 with very dangerous loan sharks. But that's not all. What else did you find? Michael has been forging your signature on bank documents for months. He used your house as collateral for several loans without your knowledge. If you had died, he would have inherited everything and been able to pay his debts. But Robert, there's one more thing you need to know." "Tell me." "Claire is also in debt up to her neck. She has overdue credit cards for more than $50,000. Both were desperate for money, and your death was the only solution they saw. Each new revelation was like a dagger to the heart. Not only Michael, but also Claire had planned my death for money. Detective Harrison, what do we need to do now? When you return to Chicago tomorrow, we'll go straight to the police station. With all the evidence we have, Michael and Claire will be arrested immediately. After hanging up, I sat in silence for a long time. Carl respected my need to process everything I'd heard. Finally, I decided it was time to do something I'd been putting off. Call Michael. Carl, I said, I want to call Michael now. I want to hear his voice when I tell him I know everything he's done. Are you sure, Robert? This could be dangerous. If he realizes his plan failed, I don't care about danger anymore. I'm tired of pretending. Tired of acting like the naive father who doesn't know anything. I want him to know his father isn't the foolish old man he thought. I dialed Michael's number. He answered on the second ring. Dad, what a surprise. How did you wake up? Did you sleep well after the party? His voice sounded falsely cheerful as always, but now I could hear the lie behind every word. Hello, Michael. Yes, I slept very well. But I have to tell you something very interesting that happened last night. What happened, Dad? Well, after the party, when I returned to my cabin, I found a man trying to enter my room. Can you believe that? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. A man? What kind of man? A man about 40 years old. Ship security arrested him. And you know what's strangest, Michael? What, Dad? When they searched his phone, they found messages from you. Messages where you gave instructions on how to kill me and make it look like an accident. The silence that followed was deafening. It lasted so long I thought Michael had hung up. Michael, are you still there? Dad, he finally said with a completely different voice, cold and calculating. I don't know what you're talking about. That's impossible. It's impossible, Michael. I have recordings of all our phone conversations. I have evidence that you never bought my return ticket. I have proof that you hired a killer. And the detective I hired has evidence of all your gambling debts and the fraudulent loans you took using my house. Another long silence. You hired a detective, Dad. Have you gone crazy? No, Michael. I've become smart for the first time in my life. I stopped blindly trusting you and started using my brain. Dad, I think the stress of the trip is affecting you. You're saying things that don't make sense. They don't make sense, Michael. Your plan failed. The man you hired is arrested. I'm alive. And tomorrow when I return to Chicago, you're going to be arrested for attempted murder. Dad, you need to calm down. When you get home, we'll talk calmly. You're confused. I'm not confused, Michael. I'm disappointed. I'm discouraged. I'm sad for having raised a son who valued money more than his own father's life. But I'm not confused. And don't call me Dad ever again, I said with a firmness I didn't know I had. A father is someone who's respected, loved, protected. You only saw me as an obstacle between you and my money. Listen to me well, Michael. When I arrive in Chicago tomorrow, I'm going to hand over all the evidence to the police station. I'm going to testify against you, and I'm going to make sure you spend the rest of your life in jail thinking about what you did to the man who gave you life. Dad, you can't do that. I'm your son. A son doesn't try to kill his father. A monster. Yes. I hung up the phone. Carl hugged me while tears rolled down my face. They weren't just tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation, anger, relief, pain. It was as if all the feelings from the past days were coming out of me at the same time. Robert, Carl said to me softly, what you just did required incredible courage. That wasn't the end of a relationship. That was the birth of a new Robert. a man who will never again allow anyone to abuse his kindness. The rest of the day we spent preparing for the return to Chicago. Captain John helped us organize all the evidence, the recordings of phone conversations, security reports, witness statements, photos of the arrested man and the objects found with him. "Mr. Sullivan," the captain told me before dinner, "I want you to know that in my 20 years sailing, I've never seen a man demonstrate as much courage and determination as you've demonstrated this week. Your son completely underestimated his own father." That night, my last night on the cruise, Carl and I had dinner in the main restaurant for the first time since the first day. I no longer had to hide, no longer had to pretend, no longer had to be afraid. "Carl," I said as we toasted with champagne, "I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done for me. You saved my life. Robert, you saved your own life. I was just your adventure companion. But I want you to know that this experience has changed me, too. It reminded me that men our age still have a lot to offer the world, a lot of strength to show. What are you going to do when we get back to land?" "I'm going back to Denver and I'm going to start living my life more fully." "And you, Robert, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure Michael pays for what he did. And then I'm going to start living for myself for the first time in 64 years. On Saturday morning, when the cruise ship arrived at the port of Miami, I was no longer the same man who had boarded that vessel 7 days earlier. I was Robert Sullivan, but a completely new version of myself, stronger, smarter, more determined than ever. Carl and I said goodbye at the port with tears in our eyes, but also with the promise to keep in touch forever. He had been more than a friend during those crucial days. He had been my brother, my ally, my savior. "Robert," he said to me as we hugged for the last time, "remember that you're no longer the man who sacrifices in silence. You're the man who fights for his life and wins. Never forget that strength you discovered." I'll never forget, Carl, and I'll never forget that when I needed someone most, you appeared like an angel in my life. My flight to Chicago left at 3:00 p.m. I had enough time to call Detective Harrison and confirm that everything was ready for what was coming. "Mr. Sullivan," the detective told me, "I have everything prepared. The moment you land, we're going straight to the police station. The chief has already reviewed all the evidence I sent him and is ready to proceed with the arrest warrants." During the flight back to Chicago, I couldn't help but reflect on everything that had happened. A week ago, I was a 64-year-old man living in silence who had dedicated his entire life to pleasing others, who had allowed himself to be underestimated and ignored. But those 7 days on the cruise had transformed me completely. I had discovered that I had a strategic intelligence I'd never used, a courage I'd never demonstrated, a determination I'd never needed. When the plane landed in Chicago, Detective Harrison was waiting for me at the airport. He was a man of approximately 50 years old, tall with gray hair and a presence that immediately inspired confidence. "Mr. Sullivan," he said, shaking my hand. "It's an honor to finally meet you. What you accomplished on that cruise was extraordinary." "Detective, I just did what I had to do to survive." "No, sir. You did much more than survive. You orchestrated your own son's downfall with a precision that even the most experienced detectives admire." We went directly to the police station where Chief Carlos Martinez was waiting for us. He was a serious man of approximately 40 years old who had meticulously reviewed all the evidence. "Mr. Sullivan," the chief said to me after hearing my complete statement, "in my 15 years as chief, I've never seen a case so well documented by the victim himself. The recordings, the financial evidence, the cruise crew statements, everything forms a case as solid as a rock." "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we issue arrest warrants for Michael Sullivan for attempted murder, criminal conspiracy, and financial fraud. For Claire Sullivan for criminal conspiracy, and complicity in attempted murder. Both will be arrested before the day ends." 2 hours later, I was sitting in my living room in my own house, waiting. Detective Harrison had insisted on staying with me until Michael and Claire were arrested in case they tried something desperate. At 6 p.m., my phone rang. It was Chief Martinez. "Mr. Sullivan, I have news. Michael and Claire have been arrested. We found them at their house, apparently preparing to flee the country. They had packed suitcases and plane tickets to Toronto." I felt a mixture of relief and deep sadness. Relief because I was finally completely safe. Sadness for the final confirmation that my son really had wanted me dead. What will happen to them now? They'll be prosecuted by justice. With all the evidence we have, they'll probably receive long prison sentences. Michael is facing charges that could lead him to 20 years in jail. Claire as an accomplice is facing up to 10 years. That night, alone in my house for the first time in a week, I sat in my favorite armchair and reflected on everything that had changed in my life. I no longer had to live in fear of my own son. I no longer had to pretend I didn't know how cruel he was. I no longer had to sacrifice my well-being for someone who didn't value me. But more importantly, I had discovered something about myself that I'd never known. I was capable of fighting for my own life and winning. The following months were a whirlwind of legal procedures. I had to testify at trial, confront Michael in court, relive all the details of his betrayal. It was painful, but also liberating. During the trial, Michael tried to act like the repentant son, like a man who had made a terrible mistake but really loved his father. But the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, text messages, the testimony of the man he'd hired to kill me, the financial evidence, everything painted the picture of a man who had coldly planned his own father's murder. On the day the sentence was announced, Michael was sentenced to 18 years in prison. Claire received 8 years. When I heard the verdict, I didn't feel joy, but I felt justice. After the trial, I made important decisions about my life. I sold the house where I'd lived for so many years, the house full of painful memories. With the money from the sale, I bought a small, comfortable apartment in a new area of the city. But most importantly was what I did with my time and energy. I began working as a volunteer at a help center for older men who had been victims of family abuse. My experience had taught me that many men my age suffered in silence, allowing their own family members to mistreat them because they believed they had no options. "Gentlemen," I would say to the men who came to the center seeking help, "I want to tell you the story of how my own son tried to kill me and how I managed not only to survive but also to bring him to justice." Every time I told my story, I saw in those men's eyes the same awakening I had experienced on the cruise. The understanding that they weren't condemned to be victims, that they had more strength and resources than they imagined. Carl and I maintained our friendship through weekly phone calls and occasional visits. He had become more than a friend. He was my battle brother, the person who had helped me discover who I really was. A year after the cruise, Carl came to visit me in Chicago. We were having dinner in my new apartment when he asked me a question that surprised me. "Robert, have you ever regretted exposing Michael? Have you ever felt nostalgic for the relationship you had before?" "Carl," I replied without hesitation. "The relationship I thought I had with Michael never really existed. It was an illusion based on my need to believe I'd raised a good man. The truth is that Michael was always manipulative, always selfish, always saw me as a means to get what he wanted. I just didn't want to see it." "And don't you miss having family?" "I have family," I said, smiling. "I have you. I have the men at the center who have become my brothers. I have a life full of people who value me for who I am and not for what they can get from me." On my second anniversary back from the cruise, I decided to do something that would symbolize my complete transformation. I signed up for dance classes. At 66 years old, I learned to dance swing, salsa, and ballroom. "Mr. Sullivan," said my dance instructor, a 30-year-old young man named Luis, "I've never seen someone your age move with such confidence and grace. Where did you learn to have such self-confidence?" "I learned at sea," I replied with a smile. "I learned that when a man fights for his life, he discovers a strength he never knew he had." Now, when I look back at those 7 days on the cruise, I don't see them as the darkest days of my life. I see them as the days that saved me, the days that taught me who I really was. I am Robert Sullivan, a man who survived the deepest betrayal imaginable. I'm a man who transformed his own son from hunter to prey. I'm a man who at 64 years old discovered it's never too late to be reborn. And if any other man my age feels defenseless, underestimated, or betrayed by his own family, I want him to know he has a strength within him that can move mountains. He just needs to decide to use it. Because when a man like me says, "If that's how you want it, my dear, have it your way. But you're going to regret it 3 times over," he's not making an empty threat. He's making a promise he'll keep to the very end. And Michael regretted it. He regretted it when he was arrested. He regretted it when he was convicted. And he'll continue regretting it every day of the next 18 years he'll spend in prison, remembering that he completely underestimated the man who gave him life. Did you like my story, and what city are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. If you like the story, you can support me by sending a super thanks so I can continue bringing more stories like this. I already thank you very much for the support. I'm waiting for your comments about the story. In the video, you can see 2 new life stories that I recommend from the heart. There's much more on my channel. Don't forget to subscribe. Until the next life story, with affection and respect from Father's advice.